Every time an American animated show comes out that is well received by audiences, the question eventually arises, is this an anime? Now, this is a rather odd question to ask to begin with. Generally, we only pose this question of a show or a movie if they're doing something genre-bending. Is Guardians of the Galaxy a comedy or a superhero movie? Is Star Wars science fiction or fantasy? Sometimes the answer is both, or neither. But when posed of some American cartoons, the answer is not so simple for many. Usually when people ask whether an American cartoon is an anime, they're responding usually to a feeling they get while watching the cartoon that reminds them of anime. There's something in the presentation or writing. Often the argument for a cartoon to be considered an anime is, look at the tone or seriousness of the writing, the art style, where or how it was animated, the action, or if it was Asian inspired. And of course, but it's good. None of these qualifiers on their own would make any show an anime. Just because the show takes itself seriously doesn't make it an anime. Just because an animated show isn't primarily a comedy doesn't make it an anime. Just because the show was animated in Asia or inspired by Asian animation or culture doesn't make it an anime. And of course, being a good show isn't enough to make a show an anime. If these were the case, then Arthur would be an anime. SpongeBob could be considered an anime. Fresh Off the Boat would be America's first Taiwanese sitcom instead of an American sitcom about a Taiwanese family. Now, to be fair, when people have conversations about what cartoon is an anime or not, they're usually talking about a handful of shows. A list that usually includes cartoons like Avatar: The Last Airbender, Castlevania, and Steven Universe. Now, these are well documented to have been inspired by anime, and some of the aspects of Japanese animation or storytelling that they utilize are done very well. However, the fact that they are made by and for Western audiences is disqualifying for them in that category, as animation is generally categorized by where it's made. Western countries' animation, including Canada and Europe, are considered cartoons, while animation made in Eastern countries, specifically East Asia, including South Korea, and of course Japanese animation, is considered anime. Yet it isn't merely where an animated show was produced that determines whether it is inherently an anime or not, even though it has something to do with it. The more essential determining factor has more to do with the nuances of a foundational cultural ethic and an emotive style that Western animation has yet to achieve or adopt from Eastern animation. Persuasive appeal is used when people construct arguments for the purpose of convincing an audience of something. These persuasive or rhetorical appeals, coined by Aristotle, are known as ethos, an appeal to ethics and credibility, logos, an appeal to logic and reason, and pathos, an appeal to emotion or feelings. These same rhetorical appeals can be applied to all media generally, but here specifically to creative media. The reason being, all media has authorial intent and persuasive elements. When you see a show or watch a movie, the authors and showrunners want you to think or feel something specific, from the music they use, to the style of animation, to the writing and dialogue. Anime and cartoons, therefore, both utilize these three persuasive appeals. However, they do so very differently, which is why most cartoons aren't placed into the same category as anime, or anime-inspired for that matter. Yet, for the few cartoons that people like to consider anime, there are some similarities. These similarities fall primarily into the category of logos. Anime-inspired or Asian-inspired cartoons follow a similar logic as anime. There's a main character who has to beat the odds, save their family, defy the world, stop the gods. They go through very human ups and downs that cause them to make similar choices across mediums. They take themselves seriously. There are tough topics like death and trauma. They even may do so with an anime-inspired aesthetic. People are very big on, if it looks like an anime, it must be an anime. These are all aspects of the logic of Asian animation or anime. Yet, even though some cartoons might look similar to anime or follow another aspect of anime logic, this alone doesn't make them anime. Anime and cartoons also have ethos and pathos, and this is the rub, where they differ the most. Let's look at the ethos or ethics of anime. In a traditional persuasive argument, this would be the author trying to build some type of credibility with the audience based upon their expertise or the expertise of their sources. Yet this isn't how ethos works necessarily when it comes to television shows and creative media like this. Yes, showrunners spend a lot of time in development researching how to make a movie or show authentic or culturally accurate. This is ethos. And yet, no one has ever accused a Pixar film of being an anime. And furthermore, when Asian countries like Japan attempt to make stories that are inspired by the Americas or other foreign places to Asia, a similar amount of research is necessary. So even though Japan has a higher level of credibility when it comes to Asian stories, the US has more credibility when it comes to American stories. So we can't merely look at the level of external authority. We have to look inside of the text, or at what's in the actual show, and review what aspects of this program would signify to the viewer that they're watching an anime and not a cartoon, or vice versa. Because creative media doesn't attempt to inform the viewer of how much research they had to do inside the text. So the question is, what amounts to an anime's credibility? When you describe the ethos of anime, we have to look at the cultural ethic or customs of Asian content that shines through the characters or the anime overall. This is a textual analysis of the show itself and the story's characters' attitudes and the show's treatment of other film or literary devices. For as similar to anime in some aspects of ethos that some anime-inspired content is, there are some key differences between the ethic of most anime-inspired content and actual anime. Asian culture is one aspect that Asian-inspired cartoons get right. Through meticulous research, many anime-inspired cartoons successfully portray the imagery, customs, and philosophies of Asian cultures. However, anime differs from cartoons in the way in which the characters and the show interacts with these elements. Let's look at food, for instance. Food and food culture is very different in the West, particularly in the Americas, than it is in the East. An American and a Japanese show can both show a banquet of food, and yet they describe them in very different ways. American food culture is very different than Japanese food culture. Although America has rich food traditions stemming from America's various ethnic communities primarily, its celebration and entertainment media almost exclusively centers fast food dining experiences and snacks.
What do you have?
Flaming Fireflakes. Best in town.
I'll take them.
Hire another slice of the cheese, Robin?
Thanks, Robin. Got room for another one, Robin?
Don't mind if I do, Robin.
No way! It can't be! Do you want to try some special new French fries?
Do I?
As barbecue, like fast food, is a very casual food experience and technically the only distinctly American culinary tradition outside of fast food. Anime, on the other hand, prioritizes home cooking experiences, unique dishes, and the intersection of nutrition and health. Anime spends significantly more screen time describing food experiences, what it means to the characters, and how unique flavors taste and feel to those characters.
肉の脂身はとろり溶けるまで煮込み、でソースと絡める。綿の苦みが食欲をそそり、濃厚な味が疲れた体に生気を。
This is the curry of life. This is just so delectable. A myriad of flavors. The spices are blended to perfection.
Hold on a sec.
The village hidden in the leaves is more than just a hop, skip, and a jump away, you know. I've whipped up a special batch that'll give you 10,000 times the strength you'll need for the journey.
Ugh, that's the reddest curry I've ever seen in my life.
これが本物のコロッケってやつか。それに中身、男爵の身に混ざっているこの茶色いのは。
Very little time is spent on the experience of food in Western animation. Western cartoons tend to describe food in very nondescript, simplistic terms like good and awesome or cheesy. This is one way to clearly discern the difference between a cartoon and an anime. Food is also used narratively in anime more often to illustrate what's happening in the narrative and what the characters are feeling, from what they eat to why they eat, as a tool to emote. Come to think of it, food-related anime are kind of its own genre of anime. When cartoons use food for the same purposes, the focus is placed on the experience of the meal rather than the food in the meal. The experience of gathering to eat with people who are dear to you for occasions like a birthday dinner, Thanksgiving, or Christmas is used in cartoons more often as a film device than the quality, look, flavor, or production of the actual food items or dishes. The focus is generally placed on whether the gathering occurred, did we get to it, rather than whether the characters ate a particular dish and what that dish signified. So food is one way in which anime differs from cartoons. If you pay attention to the use of food in these mediums, you'll be able to see a clear difference between how they're used. And this difference between fast food and unique dining, the meal or the dish, is evident even in Asian-inspired cartoons. One of a few ways in which cartoons just aren't anime.